This is Alex Swallow, the Influence Expert, and you can find the Influence Expert at www.theinfluenceexpert.com. And in this series, the Big Idea series, I try to explain a concept that I think I need to take a bit more time to explain. And in this one, I want to talk about learning how other people think. Now, this isn't going to be a psychology video, a social psychology video. Social psychology is, of course, extremely important with this, and we could look into neuroscience as well. And social psychology is actually something that I've studied in the past, but that's not really what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about here is just giving yourself the opportunity to learn how other people think. And I want to talk to you about a few key ways in which I think you can do that. The first thing is to spend time with people who are not very much like you. Now, there's all sorts of ways in which they might not be very much like you. They might be from a different background, a different age. They might have different feelings about topics that you do. They might be from another country, so travel might be a good way to meet them if you're lucky enough to travel, or you might be in a international multicultural city where you have the opportunity to meet people from all around the world without having to go very far at all. But also, you don't necessarily have to meet these people yourself. It could just be that you get to hear their perspective. So quite a lot of the mainstream media focuses on quite a narrow range of things. And I really noticed that when I lived in Japan. When I lived in Japan, I used to read a paper which was in English. And what was fascinating to me was how the news was very different to the news that I was getting back home. It was a bit different in tone. It was a bit different in the sort of things they covered, and it was a bit different in the parts of the world that they covered. And actually, sometimes our biases about the world and our understanding of how people think can be based on very partial information. So if you think of a country or a city that you don't know very much about at all, if you just take a particular place, and I'm not going to give you one, you can choose anywhere you like in any country around the world, but it has to be somewhere that you don't really know about very much. What are the things that have enabled you to build up a picture of that place? And are those fair things? By which I mean, did those things, for example, come directly from people who had lived there, or were they hearsay? Were those places only reported on when something bad had happened there? So perhaps there was a war had happened, or some criminal event, or perhaps a stock market crash, or a company going under, and that was why you heard of that particular country or that particular city. So we're starting to build up a picture here, perhaps, of the fact that actually we don't always get the most partial information, and we don't always get information that's particularly useful for us unless we make an active decision to go out there and find information ourselves. So I can give a personal example. I once went for coffee with a reasonably influential person who a lot of other people had warned me was not a particularly nice person, not a particularly caring person, liked to be unnecessarily controversial. And I found that person to be completely pleasant, and I found that that person was perhaps a little bit misunderstood. Perhaps sometimes they sort of created a rod for their own back. Perhaps it was their own fault that they're misunderstood in some ways. But in some ways, it just felt that that person just wanted a bit of respect, and for other people to acknowledge, that their view, however unpalatable or however different to other people, was a view based on experience, based on a particular view of the world, and it deserved to have some consideration without being dismissed out of hand. So experiences like that, and I've had many such experiences, and I'm sure you have too, teach us, I think, that if we really want to learn from other people, we really need to build up a fair impression ourselves of what they're like, and not just look to other people for guidance to tell us about that person or tell us about that situation. So how does this apply to influence? Well, let's suppose, for example, that you're going for an important meeting. Your company wants to win a contract from another company. And before you go into that meeting, which is with one of the senior managers in the other company, you're trying to build up an impression of what that person's like. Now, you want to form a rapport with that person, and this might be a rapport that takes many meetings and indeed many years or at least many months to build. But you want to build a bit of an understanding of what it is that makes that person tick. What are they interested in? Are there any taboo subjects? Has your company had any dealings with them before? Are there any things that make it much more likely you're going to win the contract? Can you find out from other people what previous meetings with that person's been like? But what you want to do is to try to build up a picture of that person. And what you want to make sure that you don't do, from giving the examples earlier, is that your mind's too set about them due to the opinions of other people. And we're all individuals with our individual opinions, which means that somebody who other people might find disagreeable, you might find pleasant, or vice versa. You're allowed your own opinion in these things. And in the main, I feel that you should trust your own judgment as much as you should learn from other people. You should trust your own judgment about the way that you find people and the way that people seem to you. So what I really want you to think about here is that if you're trying to find a way in which to understand other people in order to understand how they think, what makes them tick, what's important to them, you really need to speak to them themselves or get the closest first-hand information that you can about them. Then and only then can you start to make some assessments about the best way to approach how to influence them. So to finish on an example, imagine also that you're going to meet somebody at a particular company and you've heard certain things about their character that don't particularly make you think you're going to like them. Quite often, people give explanations of other people's character, obviously dependent on their own prejudices and preferences. So, for example, if you're dealing with another company and someone from your company says that they were rude, if you really trust the judgment of that person, then maybe you should take that very much into account. But it could be that they were rude because the person at your company had actually not dealt with them fairly, or had kept them waiting on the line, or had cancelled a meeting. Or it could simply be that they were rude unjustifiably to that person, but it was because they'd had some bad news at home, or they were feeling unwell, or their company had just lost a contract, or something else disagreeable and difficult had happened. So it's really important to reserve judgment as much as possible when you're dealing with other people, and if you want to learn what other people think in order to start to influence them. So my name's Alex Swallow. I hope you found that useful. And if you'd like to find out more, please go to my website, www.theinfluenceexpert.com, and also look on YouTube for my other videos, which are a mix of big ideas like this one, and also my 1 Minute Influence series, which I normally put out at least one a week. The 1 Minute Influence series gives you an influence tip in a minute or less that you can hopefully action very quickly and will make a difference to your ability to influence other people. Thank you very much for sticking with me through this video, and I hope you found that of some interest.